I gave everything I had, that I valued every moment that I spent with people. I left the person better than I found them. But I didn't take people for granted. Understand that we've been in our own world. You dream that the people behind you do it better.
Welcome back to Born Superhuman. So today's guest, he was a former police officer with Tulsa for 24 years, but 10 years serving people in the SWAT team as well. He went on, became a physique regional and state champion. He has his own TV show out in the Midwest weekly with his wife, Michelle. He's gone from serving the public through law enforcement to now taking their health and serving people, millions of people worldwide. I could go on, former pro baseball player, so many things, but let's just get straight to my guest today, Dr. Mark Sherwood.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you, Dan, very much.
I also got to say as well, you're an ordained minister.
I am, yes, sir.
You really serve the people.
Well, I mean, people are worth it. I mean, the human life, as you well know, is the most incredible, astounding, understood, creation ever. And people are amazing to me, just the differences, yet the similarities. And I just find the wonder of it all pretty amazing.
Now, the beauty that you've gone into becoming a doctor and now working really as a holistic naturopathic style doctor, looking at the root cause, not just what we're feeling. I know that you have two purposes. One is to stop the self-destruction within people, right? Bad habit decisions that we make daily that create sickness, and then also eliminating unnecessary drugs or medications. But before we get to that, tell me about you growing up, and then I'd love to also know how you met your wife, Dr. Michelle, because having two doctors on the same path, passionate, give us your childhood growing up. How did you get into the police department? You switched over to doctor, and then how you met your wife, who also, I have to say, is into huge physical abilities with jujitsu and physique modeling and championships and winning. You got two champions together.
We are. Just I'll get to the story of my wife and I in a moment, but there is a motion picture out there about her story and mine meeting. It's called The Prayer List. So a little plug for that show, which is kind of cool. As a child, I was adopted, single child home, different kind of a situation. I had good parents, but we weren't rich or anything like that. You had to struggle, I knew what that was like. We didn't have a silver spoon in our mouths. We had to work hard for everything. So I learned the values of showing up, working, not owing anybody anything, paying your bills, being a person of your word. And if you didn't have enough money, you go out and work for more. That's kind of how I was brought up and raised. And always, I suppose I wasn't the best athlete in the world. I wasn't the best really at anything, but there was some kind of will there, I suppose, Dan, that allowed me to press on. And I remember one specific unique occurrence. I was probably in the third grade, honestly, little kid in the middle of a class. I think it was English class. And the teacher asked the whole crowd, how many have something they want to do when they grow up? And all of our hands went up, And I grew up in a small town, you got to understand. So there was like 47 people in my entire class, my graduating year. So we all knew each other's business, and knew each other's likes, dislikes, what we could and couldn't do. And if we didn't know it, we'd make it up, that kind of thing, right? And so my hand went up, and I did not think the teacher would call on me, but she did. She said, Mark, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I paused because I wasn't outgoing. I was kind of shy. And I said, the first thing that came to my mind, I want to be a professional baseball player. And Dan, the whole class just erupted because I wasn't the best player on my team, not in my grade or my team. And it broke me down, man. I was just wounded. And the teacher made us all that day write down on a little piece of paper what we wanted to, become. And I did, like everybody else, but I was just hurt. And I was going out of that classroom, and I wanted to go out last so that I didn't have to face everybody before the next class, And the teacher stopped me, and she reminded me, she looked me right in the eye and she said, you never let anyone determine your future. That's on you. What other people say is impossible means that it's possible with you. Just because someone says no, you let that motivate you, but not more than you doing it for you. And I remembered that. It was like, wow. I lit up a little bit that day and I went out of that classroom and life goes on, right? But this is the irony behind that is several years later, as I sat in the dugout of one of my first professional baseball games, I remembered that note because she always told us to carry it with us, and I chose to do that, but I didn't know where it was. And I thought, wow, I remember putting that in my wallet, and I was thinking back the last place I saw it, and in the middle of the game, Dan, I found my wallet in my bag, and I searched through it, couldn't find that paper, saw my driver's license, and I don't know what made me pull that driver's license out, but I did. And I looked at it and I thought maybe it's stuck there somewhere. And I flipped my driver's license over, and that paper was stuck to the back of my driver's license. And so I took my fingers and peeled it back because it was white paper now yellowed, and I was afraid I'd break it. But I flipped that thing over, and there were the words, I will become a professional baseball player, period. And I thought, man, wow, that happened. And it blew my mind, and it was a pretty emotional moment. I'm sure my fellow players were like, what is wrong with you, dude? But I sat over there and just thought about that for a moment. But that was kind of the catalyst that, kind of told me that dreams do come true, and that if you believe in something enough and want something bad enough, you just might be able to achieve that. And when I got back from that was in Australia, actually, where I played at the time. I got back to the US and signed on a couple of teams and got cut a couple of times and realized it was time to change careers. So that led me to the police department. And once I joined the police department, a few years on, like 3 years, I tried out for the SWAT team and made it. And that was, a lot of experiential things that I saw and dealt with and did and was a part of. And again, that shapes who you are because you see people at their worst and best on their worst day. And that makes you have a unique appreciation for choices and situation and circumstances that sometimes we have some or little control over. And so I just began to think about things differently. And then at some point during my police career, I was transferred to the police academy to train and recruit and do those things. And I was tasked with building a wellness program for our department, which I didn't know what that was at the time. So I searched around the country and world, and we started one of those. And kind of just like the movie Forrest Gump, he kept on running. I kept on studying, and because I was amazed at why police officers were dying so early after retirement. And I wanted to understand, what happened to that. The life expectancy was 66 years of age. And that had been that for like 50 years. And by the way, I looked at it recently, it's the same now. And I wanted to understand it. So my mission was initially to protect and serve the people I was serving with. And I went all in and I just kept studying and I realized quickly that some of the things that they were going through that every person in the world was beginning to go through. And I thought I gotta, take my protection service and maybe expand it. Shortly after retiring, while still completing my studies, I met Michelle, my wife. And when we met, it was truly love at first sight. I remember shaking her hand, and chivalry is not dead unless you kill it. I tell all men, but I shook her hand and thanked her for her time. And there was two or three other people around at the time, ladies, and I couldn't let go of her hand. It was the most odd, strange situation. And I thought, what am I going to do now? Because here's a shy guy, and I'd been through all kinds of trauma, that I dealt with. My mom had committed suicide, and just a lot of stuff going on. So, and I was like pretty tired, and we met, and I asked her to dinner, and we probably haven't been a day apart ever since. And it's been a joy. She's been through her own stuff, so it was probably like two people that had learned to independently function and be okay and content with independence, but they both wanted someone in their life, not dependent, but independent. So two people independently coming together became interdependent instead of codependent. And so it's been a blessing. And that was about 15 years ago. And shortly thereafter, the Functional Medical Institute just took off, and we've been serving people worldwide in various capacities since that time.
What an amazing story. I have three questions from that. And again, I know the listeners are going to want to know. First off, do you remember the name of the teacher that made you write that note?
Yeah, Mrs. Nemi, Neimi. Yeah, I do. That was just, and I've seen her once since then, and I begin to thank her. I don't even think she remembered it, but she said she did. So there you go.
I think it's amazing because there's so many unwritten heroes, unsung
Yeah.
heroes, unknown heroes. That's why I wanted her name here, because the smallest word often has the biggest impact and it goes unnoticed,
Mhm.
unrecognized. And yet she really determines your life vision, if that's the right word. And I'm a huge believer, having lived it myself,
Yeah.
that what we think is where we will go. And if we don't believe we can't, as Henry Ford said, whether you think you can or can't, that's your truth. And so I think it's brilliant. The second one, when you met Michelle, where were you at the time? But did she ever recall you holding on to her hand so long? Did she feel uncomfortable, or was that ever a conversation? Because I those moments are so rare that they can feel awkward and yet feel so natural.
Well, she remembers it, and it became a point of discussion on how we both felt at the time. It was like combination of shock, awe, and awkwardness at the same time. What are you going to do with that? But I had taken a job, post retirement briefly for like a year while studying as a representative for a supplement company. It was helping me, obviously, with my education, educating physicians on how to include supplements within their own individual practices. And in her life, she had been recently kicked out or fired from mainstream medicine because too many people got too well. And to just open the doors at the Functional Medical Institute, there wasn't anybody around. And I came in, it was kind of a sales call, if you will, and met her, and truly it was love at first sight. I got to tell you, yeah, she remembers it well, and it's funny in that movie. I won't spoil the punchline, but we did have a good time portraying that handshake in a real slow motion process. So people that know the story get a real kick out of that.
That's awesome. With changing the energy just a little bit, you mentioned in here about your mother
Hmm.
and being a police officer and seeing so much tragedy in other families. Was this something that you had recognized and dismissed? Was it a shock? And how did you handle that? Because it's very different being able to separate your emotions away. I had he was like a surrogate father to me in many ways. Terry Tallybacking, who was a police officer.
Hmm.
And he would say when he would drive home after service, he would take it home with him. And he found that his relationship with his wife, beautiful Sue, was deteriorating. So he learned to turn it off at there was a stop sign. He got there, and when it was there, he turned everything off, and it changed his life. But then, when it happens in your own family, how did you deal with that?
Well, I think overall, as police officers and even first responders, I suppose you sort of taught to segment things, like you live in these little boxes. It's like you're doing this job right now, and then it's time to put your other hat on and do that, and it's time to do that. And is it how you have to cope? Yes, because if you don't, it will bleed over and create utter chaos because no one else that has not done that job could truly understand it. And the people that are closest to you, if you don't segment it or turn it off, will suffer the most because, as I've said many times, and don't take the words I'm using with inflammation, but the people closest to you see more of your ass. And I don't mean that in a negative way or positive way, but that's just kind of true to paint a good picture. But the irony at this particular time is, there was a group of men that traveled around the world called the Power Team, and we used to break bricks and bend steel in our teeth and blow up hot water balls and run through large stacks of ice, and things like that to get people's attention. It was a Christian evangelical organization, and I was part of that team. Part of the team's message was to travel around to schools during the course of the day in preparation for their night events and do anti-suicide and anti-bullying messages in schools. So I was very proficient at that and could motivate people. And I heard many stories about, thank you for what you said, et cetera, et cetera. But when that day happened, my whole world came crashing down because what do you do when it's staring you in the face? And remember, I was an only kid. I had nobody to lean on, no family to lean on. And I remember standing out there. She had actually committed suicide by jumping off of a bridge, and her car was sitting there just all by itself. And I remember this just as clear as it was. I went and sat in that car, and I saw right there on that seat of that car, it was a flat, straight seat. I saw her driver's license and her hearing aids sitting right there. And your heart sinks. You wonder what happened. There had been struggles with pain pills that can get confused in people's lives and create chaos like this. So, this leads me to where I am today, a lot because I cannot stand leaning and naming syndromes that don't exist just to give us a reason to take pain pills. So I'm there that day, and it was probably 50 degrees and raining that day, light rain, and it was cold. But I didn't feel a darn thing. I felt nothing except just deep wounds and hurt, tears, pain. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to do now? I got to somehow tell my dad his wife of 47 years is gone. How do I do that? And I made it through that and did it. And probably that day, as I stood there kind of by myself, that some of my colleagues and coworkers were standing around like looking at me, because nobody knows what to say. They don't know where to hug you or get away from you, or nobody knows. And I stood there by myself, and it was like I didn't really want to talk to anybody. That day I actually talked to God. I was just like as real as you and I are talking, and I just asked him to help me handle it so that it could be used for good for somebody else at some point, and how that maybe he would give me the ability to tell my dad in the right way what happened, and maybe in the future someone's loss like mine could perhaps be a gain or inspiration to somebody else. It's been hard, you know years go by, and I suppose the pain elongates a little bit, but it never goes away. It still hurts. You still wonder as to what if. But my whole career, police department career, and the way I viewed life at that point, it did switch a lot because I probably had more compassion than I ever had on anybody else, any time in my life, I should say. Not that I wasn't a compassionate person before, but you just never know the pain someone's else in and where they are. Think about a waitress in a restaurant who's maybe having a bad day and messed up your meal or something, what's she going through? Someone that comes into the clinic is just completely broken. I can now go that person. I can see a broken person that needs to be healed. And sometimes the best thing you can do is be there. So I learned these life lessons, and through that tragedy, it still hurts, Dan, but it's something I've learned to, I guess, deal with over time.
Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable because, like you said, the pain doesn't go away, and
Mm,
sharing it is more about the message of the impact that you can have from a tragedy. And obviously, you're going from your teacher being so impacting. Now it's your mother that gave you that
yep.
journey in life. And I've seen it with the balance training system that we sell. Our customer service staff would take a call from a customer,
Mm,
and it would end up being a 40-minute call. And maybe 2 minutes was about the product, and the other 37, 38 minutes would be about the loneliness they're going through. And they
hmm
just wanted someone to hear them, be seen, be validated, and feel something special just for a moment. So I respect so much,
Mm.
the compassion you talk about. It's not about money. It's not about, what can I get? But the greatest gifts we get are from giving. So again, thank you. Taking that, changing a little bit, what's the greatest story that you can remember before we get into, because I really want to get into your teachings. I want to get into the health benefits. That's why
Yeah.
people are listening here. Is there one story that stands out that you could say, thank goodness I learned what I learned in life because look at how it changed this person?
This probably happened 3 years ago. And keep in mind, we've been able to serve 25,000 odd people around the world. I mean, this is not a small uh, um, engine. It's a big, operation. But every person's important. But this person was in a difficult position in her life. It was a lady, and she couldn't find any answers. She was, overweight, getting, postmenopause, just very traumatic childhood, molestation, a lot of wounds, had a previous abortion, and just living in a bunch of guilt and shame, and never married, and obviously didn't have many family members that really understood or in her position even perceived they cared. And so there was a lot of loneliness, and don't remember how she contacted us or got in touch with us, but began to work with her. And it took a long time to build trust because, been there, done that. When are you going to fail me too? Kind of track record. But I like to tell people my wife and I are faithful folks because, we've learned faithfulness, and it's sort of something that you do. And faithfulness is something that is kind of rare today, unfortunately, to live by your word and do what you say. And you don't need a contract with legalese in it to define that. In our relationship with the client patient, there was a trust factor that was finally developed. And she, lived out of state, came down once or twice, we did some work and she began to have some success, a lot of it. I think she may have lost 75 pounds over like a year or something like that, and just really turned her life around. I mean, it was still struggles. But one day we were on a Zoom and she said, now I'm going to mail you something and I'm going to be down at my next visit. So she was going to mail it so that I could open it in front of her at the in-person visit. And I'm thinking, my goodness, what is this about? I had no idea. So I didn't think too much about it. Package arrives and I kind of put it this side in my desk, and she shows up, and I didn't really think about it too much until she sat down in my office, and she got my package. The first thing she said, and I thought, wow. And so I pulled it out, and she said, "Open it." So I did. Now get this. This will shake you to the core. I opened it up, and it was two or three prescription bottles of pain pills. Three, not one, three. And I said, "Well, why did you mail these to me?" And she said, and I'm paraphrasing, those were the pills that I was going to use to kill myself and end my life. So I'm like, what am I going to do now? What do you do with that? What do you want me to do with that? And I asked her, well, what do you want me to do with them? I was trying to be compassionate, but what do you do with that? And she said, I mailed those down here so that you could help me flush those down the toilet today. Oh, I mean, that was just mind blowing. That was mind blowing. So, of course, I stood up and I said, we're going right now. So I got one of the ladies that we work with, and it was one of our phlebotomists, and she's like, what are you doing, Dr. Mark? I said, come with me. I said, we're going to the bathroom right now, and you're going to make sure there's no other ladies in there, and you're going to stay in there with me. So we go to the ladies' bathroom and flush those pills down the toilet. And that's probably to this day been the most shocking, memorable moment that I've had of a turnaround that has sort of tied everything together, I guess, and brought it present.
Yeah, you were right. I did get a little shiver when she said that because I didn't
Oh,
know where it was going. And like you said, it brings it all together from your mother and the impact you had on another lady who didn't feel life was worth living. It's brilliant because one of the things that I teach at Born Superhuman is self-value, that self-love is not selfish, it's essential. It's critical that we find love for ourselves, understand that our greatest potential in life is by being who we are, our unique self, and not fitting into what we think other people expect us to be. Because the truth is, most people aren't even thinking about us.
No.
And goes on. So,
Yeah.
so let's jump forward now because I really want to get into your health directives. I know that you're all about going to the root cause, not the effect that you're feeling because it starts much deeper or a different place often than where we're feeling. What is your number one protocol that you're seeing as the main issue within society, or the over 25,000 people that you've helped heal? What is the thing that people are suffering from the most right now?
I think it's a combination of a lack of proper mindset and a lack of proper information. Because when you don't have the right mindset and you have misinformation, you've got a mindset that's the wrong mindset, and you got misinformation that becomes all you know. And so we have to unwind that because the foundational principles, which we know yield health, which is what we try to achieve, are going to be basic foundational principles like nutrition, sleep, stress management, and movement. And we try to start right there because, as you well know, and most of your listeners, I presume, would know as well, you can't out supplement, you can't out exercise, you can't out pray away a bad diet, man. You're gonna you're gonna waste your time. You got to make some changes. And so sometimes people have not been given a roadmap. They've been given complete and utter misinformation, and frankly, they don't have a lot of examples to follow. I look at our system today, and in America, we're at the most unhealthy place we've ever been in the history of mankind's existence. I mean, the Western lifestyle, Western diet, Western way of thinking has infected and affected the world in horrendous ways. It's got into people's lives across our world. And it doesn't have to be. So we spend our time unwinding that mess of misinformation and erroneous thinking. And I'm not anti medicine. That's not the point. But I am anti not having quality of life, and that's kind of what that is. So we start right there every single time. And everybody's unique and everybody goes through different developmental evolutionary stages to get there with their thinking and their mindset and their heart set connecting them. But when a person gets there, and they do, life gets better. And protocols such as supplements, hormones, peptides, and then tying genetics in there really begin to be things that yield a lot of fruit, meaning you don't hurt anymore. You get up and you're going to move. You have at least a resiliency in life to be able to function. You're not thinking about symptoms. You're not thinking about sicknesses. You're not thinking about diseases. You're thinking about climbing the next mountain or accomplishing the next goal or doing a good job on the Born Superhuman podcast. You're really thinking about that because you want to be right into that moment of the day and not be distracted. And the four biggest distractions that we tell people that we really have are these: death, disease, sickness, and lack. And if you think about it, if you're thinking about those things, you're consumed by those things, they'll consume you, and you don't have the ability to think about abundance and joy and opportunity and even courageousness to do things that maybe you didn't think you could do. So we always start at foundations, and it's not sexy, I suppose, but it is effective, and people do get better.
And that lack of sexiness is because people have to face the reality of what life really is. And to your point, when you were a young boy or growing up, if you wanted more, you worked harder.
Mm-hmm.
Now society tends to breed complaining rather than action. And so we end up sitting down and procrastinating on potential that we have to achieve. But as you go through looking at the tough things that people have to face in their reality, what would you say is the biggest sticking point that maybe someone listening that wants more but hasn't taken? What normally is the sticking point that people turn around and go, that's the issue. I don't know if I want to face it.
A lot of times, I think you touched on it a moment ago. It's worrying about what other people think. It's being in situations and not being able to or willing to or have the confidence to step up and do something different. You just kind of go along with the crowd. Um, Case in point, when I was a police officer, I got where I would bring my meals to work with me because I didn't want to eat the garbage. And I got tired eating by myself. And so I asked the guys if I could go eat with them, and they would go to the restaurant, and I would kindly bring my food in the restaurant and ask the manager if it would be okay if I sat there and ate with my friends. And I was met every single time with the managers of those restaurants, even though that probably violated food handling provisions. Sometimes they even heated my meal up for me. But you have to be willing to do things different. And I think the biggest stumbling block to people is there's not a lot of support out there. You know, persons that live healthy and learn to walk in what you call self-love, they're kind of rare because we kind of go along with the flow. We kind of go along with what's normal. Even when you're looking at labs, we look for the medical provider or one of their assistants to call us and say your labs are normal. I don't want to be normal. I want to be optimal. I want to be superhuman. I want to be extraordinary. That's what we're called to do. The enemy of excellence is average. The enemy of extraordinary is normal. And so I don't want to be normal and I don't want to be average. And so a lot of people, like even in husband and wife relationships, they're not congruent in that. And that makes it really difficult. But I tell people, especially men, and I'm hard on men because ladies in this country tend to lead the way in health. And it is what it is. But I tell the men to man up, stop being a soy boy, and step up and lead the way by example. Because when you do, that's the best thing you can do to be able to love other people abundantly. And if you don't love yourself, like you said, you're going to go with what everybody else does. And what everybody else does is going to become infectious to you and it will change who you are.
Yeah, I think you hit on it earlier as well, the misinformation.
Yep.
That people are giving information that feeds their pockets rather than
Mm.
giving information that feeds your health. And then when you don't have the effect, and this is one of the things I was talking about earlier today, the lack of trust that we now have in in the group around us and the people around us, and that we become our environment. So you've got to be so selective, but the most
Yep.
important environment is the one you build inside yourself first, because that will allow the right people in and keep the wrong people out to then get educated.
That's really important when you talk about environment. I think that's a unique way to look at it because the environment inside of you can set the tone for healing, repair, regeneration, rebuilding, or it can set the tone for lack therein. The environment within you can set the tone for proper signaling mechanisms or improper or no signaling mechanisms. So, it is environment, and you do become, like the five people you hang out with the most. I really, really, really believe that. So, even when, I do a lot of podcast, broadcast TVs and things like that, but I'm always like thinking to myself, does this person, are we congruent in our thought processes? Because it's really important. And with you, it was like a no-brainer because I was like, this guy's like awesome. I like him already. But that environment is so important.
Well, the thing is with yourself, and I put myself in that same unique specialness as well without being arrogant, it's because it comes down to one thing: we've lived it. We know it. It's not something I would go and watch speakers up on stage that are talking about health, but they're 150 pounds overweight, or a doctor that tells a patient
Yeah.
you need to lose weight, but they're 200 pounds over. If you can't live it, and I'm not saying perfection, right? Because practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. So
Yes.
what you practice will become who you are. And again, that's why when I reached out to you and said I would love for you to come on the Born Superhuman podcast, without knowing you, I heard what you were saying. And it's the truth. Even if we don't want to believe it's the truth, there's no denying it because
Mhm.
we are designed a certain way to respond to the greatest. I also love that you turned around and said, I want to be extraordinary. If I can just share a quick story.
Yes.
I was speaking down at RADFest, which is a biohacking health and wellness longevity convention. And after I got off stage, a scientist came up and said, I'm testing everybody at their cellular age. Would you mind if I test you at your cellular age? And Brian Johnson was the keynote speaker. And, it was a very eclectic kind of group, but all under one thing: I don't want to die. So I said, sure. After he tested me, he was shocked. He said, you're the third youngest person I've ever tested from chronological age, which is the day, year we're born for those that are listening, and your cellular age.
Mhm.
I had more than a 40-year span of my chronological age down to my cellular age. And he said, his first words, what are you taking?
Mm.
That was it. That's the first thought because everybody's selling something. So what are you taking that gives you? The other two people who hired me were both Olympic champions. I said, I'm not really taking anything. It's all about the way that I live. It's my mindset that I love to teach because as we change the mindset, so does our cells
Yeah.
change because they can only react off of the information they're being given to handle the stress. So that leads me on to stress. How much of current state of health is related to stress?
I would say it's at least with nutrition more than 50%. It probably would lean that way. And here's why I believe that, because a lot of people's behaviors are driven by the lack of ability to handle and understand stressful stimuli. And as it leads people down the pathway. And this is something that I hope people catch today. Stress has been misdefined in literature, medicine, etc., as a noun. And it's not. To prove the point, it's not a person, place, or thing. You can't put it in a bucket. You can't put it in a box. You can ask 10 different people what it is, you're going to get 10 different answers. Although a person, place, or thing could create and be a stimuli, stress is actually a verb. It's actually the action you take or decision you make in response to life's expected or unexpected occurrences. To prove the point, there's not a person listening now that probably hasn't been in a traffic backup and late for an appointment. No matter how mad you get, those cars are not going to move faster. The point being is the cars are the stimuli. What you do with the stimuli is your choice. So you make the decision. Am I going to allow the sympathetic nervous system to take over and go from adrenaline to cortisol and hit my steering wheel and get all angry and get flustered? Or am I going to say, this may be some kind of divine delay where I'm supposed to be quiet and just breathe and relax because I can't fix that. Maybe I need to just be calm right now, which forces us to move into the parasympathetic side where we don't get the elevation of cortisol inappropriately. But we live in a world where people are dominated by the cortisol side. Almost all the time, they're stimulated with social media, with negativity, with anger, and it's almost like an addiction at this point. And again, goes back to who you hang out with and what you listen to and who you're with and what you spend your time doing. But we need to begin to position ourselves in a world, changing the paradigm, changing the definition of stress from a noun to a verb, which takes the paralyzing effect of that which doesn't exist, that stress has power over you, and it does not. You and I, all of us, have the power to respond to stressful or stress stimuli events any way we want. Therefore, we have control over this idea of stress because it is an action we take. So we decide. And when people get that, it goes from kind of here and it goes down 13 inches and kind of sets in the heart of the bill a little bit and it becomes permanent. And that changes the mindset. And when you change the mindset, typically it changes your vision, it changes your perceptions, and that begins to change your actions. And then, as you mentioned, you practice that over time, and it becomes more and more and more permanent. And that becomes something that's stuck in you because it just becomes you. And frankly, what I just described is normal. Everything else that I described on the other side is abnormal. And we need to begin to understand that what we're doing is completely inerrancy. It's not correct. But what I just described costs nothing, but
Mm.
creates so much value and so much return on investment in our health and all our areas as well.
Again, as you said, we can change the way we perceive things, and our perception is our reality. We also know there's positive stress and negative stress. Positive
Yep.
stress is growth. You, as being a former physique champion, you still look super healthy and fit. I'm
Ah,
sure you still work out 6 days a week.
oh yeah.
That's positive. When we stress in the good way, and that often is mindset and challenges and vision and
Mm.
willingness to do things that don't feel comfortable, we know are good for us. That's so important to maintain in our life. If we look at anybody with longevity, we'll find that they have that anterior mid-cingulate cortex, which is bigger, that's around the brain, around the corpus callosum, because they constantly took challenges on, and that was positive. But then, like you just said, the negative stress, and I'll put my hand up and say, I've been punching my steering wheel. I had to
Oh yeah.
learn. And if anybody's interested, leave a comment on this podcast. I'll tell you my own
Uh,
personal story that I had to
uh,
learn from. Every level has its own devil. But what are the effects of the negative stress on the biological system within our body?
when we look at it, let's just kind of go on both sides of the pendulum. If you're living in a cortisol position, cortisol, as you just noted, is something that can keep you alive. It's good. It's the ability to fight or flee, if you needed to. And it's good. We have to have it. It's nice to have that resiliency factor, to increase resiliency by hitting those extremes, whether it be exercise, extreme cold, like a cold plunge, or hot, like a sauna, etc. Those are good. But when you're dominantly in the cortisol mode, from a biological standpoint and physiological standpoint, the following things will happen. Blood pressure goes up, heart rate goes up, perspiration goes up, muscle tension goes up. You see your digestion go down, and your desire to procreate or libido goes down. And that would be normal and expected physiological actions from a human system that's trying to protect you, because the body knows no different between the traffic jam and a bear that's trying to eat you and chasing after you, because our genes have only changed 2% in 10,000 years. So we don't know a difference, and we don't know, we don't perceive that. It's fight or flight, period. The more you live like that, you will see the leaky gut occur, hypertension occur, sleeplessness occur, insomnia, libido goes down. All of the cholesterol that's produced in your body the dominant part will go to make cholesterol or make cortisol, because cortisol is constructed from cholesterol. And it will shift away from the sex steroid hormones that are needed to procreate or have this desire for intimacy. You live like that all the time. Over the course of time, you get used to it. And Dr. Hans Selye coined a term, general adaptation syndrome, meaning you get stuck in a place that seems comfortable. Your body will adapt where it is because it's trying to survive. All it knows is how to run. All it knows is how to fight. And over the course of time, that will kill you. Notice that general starts with a G, adaptation with an A, syndrome with an S. Gas. A good way to remember it, over time, you run out of gas and you die because you're living over here all the time. One of the best things I have ever practiced or taught people to do regarding how to get out of that mode would be to stop and do 1 minute of silence. And I've done this in crowds of 550 and 5,000, and it's just the most odd but joyous time ever. I'll tell them to stop, no sounds, no nothing, everybody just silence, look at your watch. And they do. And I wait until mine gets on the top, that 12, and I say, when I say now, no sound, no whispering, no nothing. And the room is silent. You hear shuffling around, And I might say, shh, but then it's quiet. 30 seconds in, it is just so silent. 45 seconds in, it's even more silent. 1 minute, and I say, time in that tone of voice. It's still silent because the human body does not want to be stuck over here. It is desperately crying out to be in a more balanced place. So that over here on the physiological side, blood pressure goes down, heart rate goes down, muscle tension goes down, perspiration goes down, digestion goes up, rest goes up, repair goes up, regeneration goes up, and libido goes up. And so I paint that picture to say, you kind of pick what you want your life to be like. There's need to be over here sometimes, as you mentioned. I worked out today, and today was one of my times where I do a high intensity training session. I do that periodically, and it was challenging, really hard. But I'm not going to do that tomorrow. Not
Mhm.
tomorrow. Tomorrow is a different day. And so I think that gives people a sense of the physiological part of that. But when you're stuck over in the cortisol mode, keep in mind that cortisol is a glucocorticoid, meaning it does drive glucose because digestion necessarily goes down. And you see people begin to accumulate fat. You see them begin to have that cortisol belly. And the more fat that comes up, the more they secrete that hormone leptin. And the more leptin that comes up, the more the brain resists it over time. And the more fat situation grows. And then their thyroid goes down. And then they've got hypothyroid and low hormone functions and high cortisol. They're getting fat and they get brain fog and lose sleep. And that is a pattern that I see so much today. And then we resort to taking all kinds of medications and even supplements to try to correct those symptoms.
Yeah, I think that goes back so beautifully to we have an understanding of what we think it is. Like when you start looking at the fat gain, and then you go on these fad diets or quick fix diets, and then the
Yeah.
fasting. And I am a believer in fasting, but being done for the right reasons, not
Mhm.
to try and cover up a symptom. And then people then go, well, nothing's going to work, but they haven't actually looked at their lifestyle. They're just looking at the fat as a separate entity that I want to get rid of.
Right.
Nutrition. I want to jump onto this. Talk about the food we're consuming. We know that the soil now has lost 85% of the minerals and needs that we have because of the turnover of the soil, the
Mhm.
speed, the chemicals being sprayed. What are you finding is something that somebody that is suffering from, they don't even know it's malnutrition, but they're not able to gain strength in their nutrition program? What advice would you give them?
You mentioned the key element to restate again. The soil quality where the plants and animals, eat from or come from has been so degraded of the vitamins and mineral content that doesn't get in the plants and doesn't get in the animals. Therefore, we have this low quality, low nutrient dense, even in the highest quality selections of nutrition we eat. So it is incumbent upon us to select well, eat as natural as possible, as organic as possible, proteins, free range, grass fed, grass finished, organic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, wild caught. Those are good. But even with that, and I do a lot of testing on this, you still see micronutrient deficiencies. You still see fatty acid deficiencies. You still see amino acid deficiencies. And this is what I've seen 100% of the time. I have seen deficiencies of omega-3 fatty acids 100% of the time over 15 years in every single person I've tested, unless they were supplementing properly. Most of the time, inadequacies of vitamin D, because vitamin D is made from cholesterol, and we take this bombardment of these statin drugs, which I believe are also in our water supply. And then you have B vitamins and magnesium that are generally always deficient. And so this is where supplements become a necessity, but they become a necessity only in the right context as supplementing what the good nutritional selection does not do or is not capable of doing. And by understanding that, you're not taking supplements to override anything. You're taking them as part of your food. It becomes part of your groceries. And that really is helpful. Most people don't know that because in the supplement world, $150 billion, give or take what it is right now. And there's a lot of mess out there advertising that gets you to believe that you can take this to override that. It doesn't work like that, as we just clearly laid out and proved the point in our discussion. So I find that to be a critical factor that people need to get. And this is one thing I want to say too, is that it is more inexpensive to consume healthy foods because they're nutrient dense as compared to high calorie, low nutrient dense foods because they're not nutrient dense. And you will not find yourself being satisfied. You'll find yourself craving for more because the body does not live on calories, it lives on nutrients. And so I think, putting those two things together is super helpful for people.
And here I'm going to do a plug for you because I know you have an Amazon best-selling book and your first movie, which was called Fork Your
Yeah.
Diet, right? And,
Yeah.
and I wanted to spell that out, Fork,
Oh,
just so
yeah.
you know, it's Fork Your Diet, in case they think I've got a funny accent. But I will say, Mark, you have the accent.
I do.
Yeah, there you go. There's so much information in there about we eat for the body. We're not eating to quell a hunger. It's the need of the body that's coming out there.
That's right.
What would you say is deficiencies in vitamin D, deficiencies in magnesium, all these things, they
Mhm.
all play a vital role
Yeah.
in there. What have you found may be the most deficient supplementation that we're living with in this world today?
I think that it's probably in the area of maybe three things: D, magnesium, and omega-3 fatty acids. Keeping in mind the mechanism of actions are broad. Magnesium has 350 chemical reactions in the body. We have to have it. Have to have it for cellular energy. We have to have it for relaxation. We have to have it for production of various pathways. Vitamin D is important for bones, immune system, brain, depression, etc. Omega 3s are super important for inflammation control or modulation, brain health, heart disease protection, and cell membrane repair. So I've seen it time and time and time again, those being deficient. And I honestly don't need to test. I can just ask questions on what people are doing and I can tell them exactly what they're missing. And a lot of times I can listen to their symptoms and just hear them and I can go, you know what, you are deficient in this or this or this. They're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, just trust me, I've done this a long time. And then some people have to see it by a test, but it always plays out that way.
Brings up a fascinating question in here. Recently, I found an incredible supplement company, but I could only find them by going in and watching the testing they're doing on
Mhm.
their products to make sure that the ID process, the quality control, the bioavailability, that's how much we can actually absorb of what we're
Mhm.
taking. Because most of the time, we either can have something that we're taking that's actually a toxin to us, or it's just very expensive urine. How do you go ahead and find out what you're taking is actually what they're saying it is? Because so many things use white
Hmm.
paper clinical studies as their proof of the name, but it's not the same process for our health.
I think we talked on the phone recently in prior to this podcast, and I was actually out of town visiting a lab on their dime. I made them pay for my trip. I went through a tour. I asked the questions. I wanted to see their quality control, their quality assurance. I want to see their processes. I want to see their testing. I went through all that. And, just because people say something, it doesn't mean something. You need to see, hear, smell, touch, just go through the process. And I want to go to these labs in their dirtiest, most busiest times. And I go during the middle of the day. I don't want to go first thing in the morning. I don't want to go after they clean everything up. I want to go in the middle of the day and to know what's happening. So we're those people because the supplement industry out there is corrupt to the core, and the standards that we have might be able to be passed. That does not mean the standards are good. So you have to look sort of at what is this, what's acceptable, and then what's excellent. And you want to lean, as we've talked about through this entire time, lean in towards excellence, not just acceptable, like average. It's like telling your kid's sports team to go out there and give 80%, and that's good enough. As a coach, you'd get fired. I look at supplements the same way, and we're very um, disloyal as a entity to any supplement company that's not willing to, show the cards. Because the way I look at it, my name, I know you believe the same thing. Our names mean something. If I'm going to recommend something, I'm going to be doing it. And if I'm not doing it, I'm not going to recommend it. And I'm not going to be hypocritical, like you talked about earlier. Why would somebody listen to me if I'm not living it? And that includes the selection process of what we decide to put in our body, even through supplementation.
Yeah, and I got to put this kind of a shameless plug here. I have to say, I've got my own supplement that's coming out. It's
Yeah.
taken a long time to implement and find the right partner, but it's all to do with gut health because I'm a huge
Yeah.
believer that gut health is really the driver for the inflammation in our body. And I couldn't be more excited. I've been doing this now, I've been taking it myself as a test for about coming on to 8 weeks now. And the difference in my health, my performance in racing bikes, in my body, in my now 10 pack, which is exciting to go. But it also had to correlate inside with something that I speak about. When we're hungry, we eat. And so
Yeah.
I was eating candy, chocolates, sweets, cookies, all the stuff because we just grab because we're being told we're hungry from
Oh,
our
yeah.
food to our brain. I changed one word and I went from a 21.2% body fat to an 8.2% body fat by changing one word. And that, as you've already said, that word was nourish. When I'm
Mhm.
hungry, when I began to feel hungry, I said, okay, what can I use to nourish my body? And suddenly salads, fruits, natural food suddenly became attractive. And my brain actually turned me off and my mindset turned me off of grabbing those things.
Mhm.
How important is it for somebody to, and where can they get the research to find if what they're buying is actually as it's promoted? And what would they have to read on the labels? Or is there any tips you can give? Because if everyone needs to supplement, it's not actually supplementing, it's taking the right nutrients the body needs.
Yeah, I think that we go back and to affirm this another time. I think people need to hear it. When the body is truly needing something, needing nourishment, you will get a proper signal to do that. And that has nothing to do with time. It has everything to do with the communication from the body to you. A lot of the communication is from the gut to the brain. The brain is not the first brain, in my opinion. I think the gut's the first brain. I know it's referred to the second brain. So there's a lot of stuff goes on, and the better your gut health is, the more you're going to be able to hear that signal. But food is nothing more than a vehicle to provide micronutrients to the body's systems for operation. That's what it is. And so it's not about just eating because it's time. It's eating because we need nourishment. And so I think that's a brilliant way to say it. A couple tools that people can look at. You're going to see at least standardization out there, like GMP is a good label or standard to look for. It's not, everything, but it's pretty good. It stands for Good Manufacturing Practices. That simply means that there is, when the material is sourced from a supplement company, they will quarantine that and test that for metals and toxins and things of that nature before they bring it into the production pipeline. They will also test it during the production pipeline so that during the process of combining with other ingredients, you don't get any of the same stuff that shows up as well. So you get 1, 2 tests. And then the third step of this is to be able to have what it says on the label or more for a period of 2 years. That's generally speaking the proper order. And that's going to be a GMP certified as a very general rule. NSF is also another certification that people can look for out there. That's not to say there's not companies out here that don't produce standards of products or even better than that. But that's to say that's a general way to look at it. It is probably best not to just go down to your normal old box store or even pharmacies and buy stuff because there's nothing behind that to back that up. And I certainly would lean people against just buying something from a quote unquote, TV doctor that doesn't see anybody and hasn't seen anybody for a number of years. That kind of turns me off. I'm thinking, you're trying to tell me how to live healthy, but I've seen you eating that cheeseburger in the green room over here, dude. And so I'm like, that's not cool. So, I think those are some things that people can lean into as just guides. And then you got to be at peace, man. Ask questions, get on the research, do your questioning, call the company, interview them, ask them questions. And if they don't want to answer, go shop somewhere else.
I think that's a great point because people are embarrassed to sound ignorant.
Yeah.
Right? If I call up and ask this question, I'm going to sound stupid or dumb, and I'm going to protect myself. And yet, what your advice is the complete opposite.
Yep.
Admit I don't know enough, so educate me.
That's right. And they should want to do that. Teachers are good at teaching. When I instruct people and my wife instructs people, I want the students to become better teachers. And if I instruct people well in that realm, if I'm a supplement manufacturer and I instruct people well, they're going to be a great advocate. So it's a no-brainer. And nobody's ignorant out here. I think the only ignorance lies in the fear to ask a question. Ask your questions. Be curious. I wake up every day, and the more I know, Dan, the more I know I don't know. And so I'll ask as many questions as anybody else. And you can learn a lot of stuff about yourself and other people by asking questions and listening.
Yeah, there's a saying that came off of that I love. The greatest leaders are not the ones with the most followers. The greatest leaders are the ones that create the most leaders.
Yeah, I
And
would agree with that.
how can you create a leader if you're not willing to share information? And so if they're not, it's because they want to keep you as a follower and as a lemming, just following the Kool-Aid, basically.
It's
There's
good.
there's something as well that it's not always what we take, it's what we eliminate. And to eliminate, I believe in life right now, it's eliminating the waste of time on things that aren't important and don't serve us. If we can eliminate the wasted of time, we can then open up time to do things that are valuable, which wants me, I want to come on to now movement, exercise that obviously you and Dr. Michelle are both experts at in your history of life. What is the impact and necessity just for basic movement and then growth into?
Well, you mentioned a key point that I think is worth memorializing, in concrete. Time is valuable. You get 1,440 minutes a day. That's all you get. I know people are getting their calculator out right now, confirming what I just said. That's true. But how you spend that time is a decision you cannot get back. You can't go back and get a refund for that. So spend those minutes wisely because it doesn't matter how much money you make or don't make. We all get paid the same in that more valuable currency called time. So you have to be structured and scheduled. I have a regimen and practice that I follow, and I get up in the morning and just normal. I'll get quiet and usually pray and meditate, just get quiet from my day. Then I'm going to the gym. I started off with quietness and meditation and movement. And it starts off my day in a way that clears my mind out and my heart out for the ability to give. You mentioned earlier, giving yourself some time like that at the start of the day is not selfish. It's actually selfless. You can give more to other people because your well is dug deeper, and but we look at it like this. Movement is life. Muscles are longevity. The more you move, the more you live. The less you move, the more you die. And when you stop moving, that's called rigor mortis. And you got to keep moving. I mean, find something you like, whether it's riding a bike, walking, lifting weights, or all of the above, and do it more. Movement is something we should be celebrating. I don't even look at my life anymore. I mean, I exercise, yeah, pretty much daily, but I don't look at it as exercises. I look at it as movement. And I truly have shifted my thinking to be grateful that I can move, and I just celebrate the movement. And it's a release, it's freedom. And of course I try to do better. I try to manage that well. My wife calls it capital preservation, and she's right. But try to manage that. But movement is so critical because it is the thing that pushes blood around the system efficiently, and the life is in the blood. The blood carries these vitamins, minerals, amino acids, proteins, white blood cells, peptides, hormones around the system to create the signaling pathway for cellular signaling to bring about repair. And so we have to have good circulation. It's also about detoxification. You can't move that lymphatic drainage system unless you move. So there's so much to movement. Sitting, I would say another little statement that people remember is the new smoking.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in movement. And for
Mhm.
anybody listening, one of the things that I've been able to help you, I've trained more than 70,000 people that have lost their balance, whether it's through MS, Parkinson's, aging,
Mhm.
stroke, TBIs, and all the other things that stop us from feeling balanced as well, is go back and think about what you loved doing as a child.
Yeah.
If you can find out what those neurons, those memory neurons are still
Mhm.
there that you loved it, and when you start doing it again, it's not about I can't do it as well. It's that I'm doing it again. So
Yep.
find something like you said perfectly. Find something you love to do, whether
Mhm.
it's dancing, whether it's playing Don't Step on the Cracks when you're walking down the
Oh
street,
yeah.
whatever it is. Have fun moving.
It's funny when I'm go out for a walk. I mean, one of the things I did as a kid, I'd go walk. I just got kind of a thrill out of that, and I've taken up walking again in the latter years, and I'll go out and usually walk in an afternoon or evening, and I play those games. I don't step on the cracks. I walk over them. I kind of it's kind of fun. It brings me back a little bit of joy, and I don't do it for speed or anything like that. I just kind of do it because the movement is something that can metabolize adrenaline, which is the precursor to cortisol, better than any drug ever could. They've done head-to-head studies with drugs like Paxil compared to a 45 or 30-minute walk, and time again, it's confirmed that the movement is a better antidepressant. So there's a lot to movement that we sometimes don't correlate, but it does matter.
How important, and there's a lot of, um, if I call them celebrity influencers that love to talk about weight training. For me personally, I think some of them are more extreme because you've got to outdo the other message and show you can do more. But you talk about muscles is longevity.
Mhm.
How would you work with someone that's never lifted before? They've just been out living life, and there's billions of people all over the world that have never stepped foot in a gym. How
Yeah.
in the later days could you incorporate weight or strength training? What do you recommend there?
I always start in a place that they are. You don't need to go to the gym to take up resistance training. You use body weight things. Most people have heard of a push-up. Most people would know what it means to just set a kitchen chair down there and stand in front of it and sit down and get back up again, not using your hands. You know, um, Maybe understanding a plank or something of that nature. Maybe some stretches. That's where you start. You start where someone is. It's not about competing against Jim or James or Tom or Dan or Mark. It's really about understanding what muscles do. Muscles don't push, they pull. They pull the bones via tendon attachments to cause the bones to move. When I tell myself I want my lower arm to move towards my head, my two biceps via attachment to a tendon to my lower arm bones are contracting or shortening or pulling my arm up. So muscles increase movement ability. When I mix in some resistance training, that in turn signals the bones to pull in nutrients, calcium, phosphorus, silica, collagen to create more density. So muscles help create bone density. So all that put together, movement is mobility. Mobility equates to independence. And that's where I start. You don't need to go to the gym. Gym's only been around a couple hundred years, I suppose, right? So we don't need to really think about that. Could you go to a gym? Yes. Do you have to? No. Do you have to lift weights? No. You could pick up, sandbags or something if you wanted to, soup cans or something like that from your kitchen. There's all kinds of things you can do, but we do need to have some sort of progressive resistance type of training situation going on 2 or 3 times a week, preferably three, that stresses our muscles to create more adaptation so that those muscles will continue to grow because we do lose about a half pound of lean muscle tissue per year after by the age of 25. So you really talk about you're in a degradation state from 25 years of age going forward. So the only way to stop the degradation state would be to what? Build a 1/2 pound of lean muscle tissue. So I think movement resistance training is necessary, but it doesn't need to be like busting out a bunch of weights.
Yeah, I also in in agreement with that. For people that have never lifted or they're losing muscle mass, and I've seen it so much in the
Oh,
senior generation,
yeah.
because it is harder to now to grow muscle, develop muscle. I love to suggest make games, make an
Yeah.
agility course instead of just going, okay, I'll lift 5 times with the thing. Make it so that maybe it's a 1 minute little course. So you put a couple of cans down, you're going to do 10 bicep curls, then you're going to step over and then maybe the tile on the floor without stepping on the cracks. And then you're going to go and push down on the table 3 times. And if you can create a course, it becomes fun. But even more than that, you feel rewarded yourself, like you're proud of yourself. I think it's so important. So look at that. Have you ever researched or looked into blood flow restriction training?
I have. I do think there's a lot of positive benefits to that. It just makes a lot of sense. You're sort of causing a restriction process, and it's almost like not the same, but people get the analogy. It's almost like an ice bath or a cold plunge. You're restricting something, and as soon as you unrestrict it, you get this flow. And the classic flow is an increased flow of blood to an area. And the more blood flow, the better blood flow you can get to the periphery, the more healing you can get at the periphery. And so that's just a more robust circulatory system. So I do think there's a lot to that. It's something I've looked at myself quite a bit over the last probably 6 months to 12 months. I haven't employed it yet, to be transparent, but it's something I'm looking at now to even look at employing in my own life.
Yeah, so I've started using it. I've been using it actually for about a year and a half now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's an amazing story, and you got to be very careful. Just for anybody listening, don't just
Mm-hmm.
go out and buy a blood flow
No,
restriction band and put it on because you can actually kill your cells.
you
You can
can.
actually stop oxygen from getting to your body. You need to have a scientifically proven guided system that's out there. But there was a lady who was in a coma for many
Mm.
months, and they put blood flow restriction training on a specific model, the one that I use. She put on 20 pounds of muscle in a coma.
Wow.
That and I'll
Wow.
share this with
Fascinating.
you as well. But it's an incredible system, and now every single workout I do with blood flow restriction because I can lift less weight,
Mm-hmm.
which means that my joints aren't being challenged compared to when I was at my strongest. My muscles are getting more action because now they're having to work, but the restriction of the blood flow is not on the way out. In
Yeah.
other words, the oxygen's going into the muscles when they're working. It's the restriction going back to the heart that gets pushed through the little heart behind your calf on the gravity side. But it doesn't stop the blood flow. It's just enough to a little bit like a hose pipe, right? Where you squeeze
Yeah,
a little bit, the
exactly.
water's still
Squeeze it.
coming out. When you let go, it pumps. So very exciting, very exciting. And I
Yeah.
look forward to sharing more with you about that.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's been
Please do.
huge. If you were to leave, and I'd love for you to come back again, we'll get more specific next
Sure.
time on maybe questions that people ask. What message would you like to leave or advice you would like to leave to anyone listening about their lifestyle, their potential, and how important it is to dream big?
Don't let the failures, the fall downs, and mistakes of yesterday become something that messes up your today. And you can look back at yesterday like looking in the rearview mirror of a car. You really can. And you can look at that and go, you know what? There's a reference point back there, but don't lose the vision of the panoramic windshield today. And you want to start today with lifestyle. We talked about 1,440 minutes. That clock is ticking in today. Utilize the rest of your minutes today, wherever you are as you listen to this podcast, and start right now. Start right now to give yourself the opportunity to have the best life possible because what you do today will affect your tomorrow. And if you can think like that and push forward instead of reflecting backwards all the time, you'll see your life press forward as well. And it's one day at a time. As we said it many times before, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. So, you kind of want to live today like it's your last and live today like you're going to live forever. I know it seems like an oxymoron or not possible. But that if you can begin to look at that like that, you can actually receive some encouragement. So if anything that I've said today in this time, and I've just thoroughly had a great time with you, Dan. You're a good man. This is the most important part, in my opinion, to leave people with hope, so they can start today and have a hopeful life.
That's beautiful. Where can people find you? Because I know you've got an incredible program and there's other good programs out there, but one of the things that makes you unique is the true, genuine care that you didn't choose a profession to go into for your career. You were driven there because of your care for people, and people
Mhm.
feel that when they're around you and around Dr. Michelle. Where can they find you?
Well, we're easy to find. People can go to our websites are super easy, drmarksherwood.com. There's no period there, just drmarksherwood.com. DR period, DR Mark Sherwood. And then my wife is drmichellesherwood.com. And I will say on my wife, it's Michelle with one L. And to her, she laughs and gets mad at me a little bit, but there's no hell in my Michelle. So there you go. That's a good way to remember that one. So it's drmarksherwood.com and drmichellesherwood.com. And we're grateful. We've done this a long time, and through the beauty of multi-state licensures and other, mechanisms like this, we're able to have the opportunity to help people around the world. So it's a blessing.
Last question. In 50 years' time, what would you like people to say and the legacy that Dr. Mark Sherwood leaves?
That I gave everything I had, that I valued every moment that I spent with people, and that I left the person better than I found them. That I didn't take people for granted, that I did what I said I was going to do, and followed my word. And that's the legacy that I hope both my wife and I leave, and that we modeled, what we taught. And like anything else, I understand leadership. I understand that we've been in our own world in the functional medicine, biohacking, longevity space. We've been like these trailblazer people, and I get that. And like any trailblazer person, you dream that the people behind you do it better. So that would be it right there.
Dr. Mark, thank you so much for spending your time here on Born Superhuman and continue. I know you will. I shouldn't even tell you. It's like I'm telling you to keep doing it. No, your mission, your path, your purpose
Yeah.
is beautiful. I wish you and all of your, I don't even want to say clients, patients, I'll just say your success stories. I wish them all the
Mhm.
best.
Thank you, Dan, for having me. I appreciate it.